operate in truth, right? Operate in truth. Tell the truth.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Gator Truth Florida Football Podcast. I'm Daniel, and on this episode, we're going to take a look back at the Gators' 33-20 loss to the Texas A&M Aggies this past Saturday in the Swamp. And it was a kind of weird game in that there was a weather delay, and then after the weather delay, then we got the rain and the downpour. So for us fans, a little bit different experience for those of us that were there. Definitely not a great game, and we'll get to that. I will review the game. I also give my piece on the Billy Napier situation and what I believe should happen. Of course, talked about before. I said good coach gets 6-1, and currently we are at 1-2, and that's out of the first 7. So you probably know where I'm going, but definitely stick around for that. Interesting quote I do have in there from someone you probably won't expect. Before I get into it, I really just want to ask if you enjoy this content, give this video a like, maybe share this with some friends. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. I am trying to do more content. Funny enough, on Saturday, I was trying to do some man on street interviews, and the guy, I don't know if you've seen it. If you haven't, try and find the video of Jesse Palmer talking about the guy in the friend zone. I kid you not. As I'm trying to do a man on the street interviews, get people's opinion before the game of the A&M game, that dude actually walked by me and said, no, I'm not saying he was cursed by not just stopping, giving me a moment of his time. But hey, he got trolled by Jesse Palmer on national television. So I guess I can't feel bad for that. But I did get a clip with a A&M fan. I have not checked out the audio to make sure that's been good yet, but just something to keep an eye out for on the channel. Also coming up on the channel, we're going to have Landon from the My Dogs Are Barking podcast this week, talking about the Gators matchup with the Bulldogs. And of course, later on this week is the preview of our trip to Starkville. And with that said, let's go ahead. Let's get into it. Again, please like, share, subscribe if you have not already. Let's try and get 50 likes on this video if you do enjoy this episode. Also down below, comment and let me know. I've not done slides for the last few episodes. I used to do them a lot. And then with some feedback, I stopped doing them. So let me know. Maybe I can find a happy medium if you would like to see some of the slides back that I do for the video presentation. Of course, if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast, you're not going to get the slides. But for those of you watching on YouTube, definitely do. And so with that said, before we begin, I want to give a shout out to Alvarez Lawn Company. And I'll be honest, a friend of mine from Alvarez Lawn Company went with me to the Texas A&M game. And he said he loves the shout outs. I definitely do want to shout these guys out. So if you are in the Central Florida area and you have a lawn project, whether that's just I'm tired of mowing in the summer heat, or I've got a landscaping deal I need done and I'm not sure how to do it, give my friends in Central Florida a call or you can text them for a free quote at 407-490-2617. Once again, you can call or text them for a free quote at 407-490-2617. Alvarez Lawn Company, building plans that work for you. All right, so let me get us started with talking about the offense. Now, there are a few interesting things that I believe happened with this offense. The first thing is the series on, series off between Graham Mertz and DJ Lagway and that kind of rotation. In my preview, I really talked about how I thought Graham Mertz was being set up for a bad situation. And I will say this, the rotation of the quarterbacks definitely lowered that probability because it's hard for, the offense, which did struggle in the first half, for any one quarterback or player to get the blame. but also it kept fans in many ways from doing what I hope they wouldn't do, and that's booing in a way that can be perceived as booing Graham Mertz. Now, Graham Mertz, I felt, played decently well in this game for what it was, and we'll get into those numbers in just a sec. But it was definitely not the best game, and we'll get to my third key to the game, which ended up being unavailable. So the first key to the game I had was to establish the run. And I talked about how, A&M was giving up over 180 yards per game on the ground in between Notre Dame and McNeese State. In fact, the week before, McNeese State had run for 180 yards on the Aggies at Kyle Field. So you think a good running team would be able to take advantage of that, or a run-first offense, which we are. Now, I've talked many, many times over the past 2+ years about you need a quick passing game. You need to get vertical to open up those run lanes. Well, I figured in this game, maybe we can start off with a run and go from there. Unfortunately, we couldn't. But again, that is what it is. The Gators end up with only 52 yards where McNeese State got 180. Now, some of that could be McNeese State playing backups, but at the same time, at the University of Florida, you should be able to do pretty well. You should have been able to get to at least 120 yards. So the 52 is tragic. And I know someone out there is going to say, well, Daniel, what about the sack yardage? You're right. If we took the sack yardage to neutral, took it to 0, we would still be at 72 yards. Montrell Johnson for the day, 7 carries, -7 yards. Longest carry of the day was 2 yards. Some of that was, on some not good plays and not necessarily his fault, but just an example of, hey, our run game had to get going and it did not. And of course, that kind of hurt the offense quite a bit. Now, to talk about this second key that I had, which was to get vertical. And again, vertical, get us 10+ yards. I'm not asking necessarily for a deep ball, going 60 yards down the field, but something to back off the D. I will say this, some of these numbers are a little skewed in different ways, and some of these numbers are, just depending on where we were in the game. And what I mean by that, DJ Lagway had 8 throws of 10+ yards. He was 2 of 8 on them. Obviously, he has to be better. One of those throws was a Hail Mary at the end of the first half, which, of course, ended up being an interception. But again, end of the half interception is not quite the same as if he's throwing an interception on a regular drive or on a regular play, which he did do later on in the game. But that's what I'm saying is some of these numbers, they're not good. But then you throw in, he had 2 interceptions. Well, one was really tossing the ball up on a prayer and hoping we got a touchdown. Unfortunately, did not happen, but I'm not going to be like, that's a bad INT. I am happy with Graham Mertz, though. 6 of 8 on throws of 10+ yards. Definitely some good throws. Of course, we want to see more of that more consistently throughout the game. There are times that we saw a few in a row and then it would disappear and then it would come back. And that's not necessarily on Mertz or on DJ, kind of on play calling. And that's just, unfortunately, that with a bad running game, 8 completions where the ball travels 10 yards or more we've got to find a way to get more. Some of that is on the O-line, but when other teams know they're not going to be punished or likely are not going to be punished, they're going to come at you and come at you hard because what are you going to do to make us pay for it? And then I do want to point out only 2 wide receivers. We've got multiple 4-star receivers on this team, whether it's, the true freshman of Abrams or Hawkins, or whether we're talking about, Aiden Mizell. Of course, Trey Wilson was out. Andy Jean is still dealing with injuries from what I understand. But we do have talent at the receiver. And that's not including the transfers of DK and Badger, who were the only two receivers to catch the ball. And yet, all we're doing is seeing two of our receivers catching balls, and that's not going to help. Not going to help anyone really at all when that's all the, all the production you're seeing. Three other guys caught balls besides Badger and DK, who both had over 90 yards, Badger with 94, DK with 91. Boardingham caught 5 for 42. Hayden Hansen and Tony Livingston, both also tight ends, each had a catch for 11 yards. And again, it's nice to see the tight ends get involved, but really, if you're going to the tight ends that much and you're not hitting your receivers that much, that allows the other teams to play a lot more strictly in the box, a lot more big guys, a lot tighter. When we play our tight, meaning the receivers are close to the offensive line, we do have plenty of formations. We're very tight and we run up the middle. Well, they're more prepared to have run stuffers like linebackers in the game because we're not going and making them pay with these receivers. We're not spraying the ball out to get the ball to the receivers. And it's really odd, and I can get it pulled up, but it's really odd that, we have former walk-on Spirito out there getting, more reps than some of these 4-star guys. And I'm not saying he has or hasn't earned it, but also if our 4-star guys are not beating out a former walk-on, and it's not like he's out there being Chris Doring, what's that say about either our development under Napier and Billy Gonzalez right now, or what's it saying about the talent acquisition side of things and the scouting department? Not to say that that's, full reason why Gators lost. I'm not saying that, but it was something interesting from Saturday that I don't think I've seen for a good while, which is only 2 different receivers catching passes. The third key I had for the Gators in this game was, of course, to get Eugene Wilson the ball early and get Wilson the ball often. The problem is Trey Wilson didn't play. He was out, didn't dress out, so it was unfortunate, and I'm sure that impacted some of the game plan. Of course, it's always great to have a guy who can take a pop pass beyond the line, and you never know if it's going to go for 10, 15, 40, or as we saw against Samford, 85 yards, and be able to make guys miss. And definitely probably the most dynamic guy that we have on this offense. So that did hurt. But again, we've got to be able to find ways to get people the ball. We did see, some of our talented true freshmen, get some touches, like Tank Hawkins, who's a 4-star receiver. He didn't get a catch, but he got 2 carries for 7 yards. Hope to see more with his speed. Unfortunately, didn't. That's not on him, but at least we were trying to do something to make up at times. Granted, again, I just said 2 for what was not happening with the receivers and with Trey out. I do also want to say Treon Webb, 6 carries, 37 yards, over 6-yard average. Good to see him come out. I was hoping to see more from him coming to the year, and definitely good to see him at least having a pretty good yards per carry. Jacoby Jackson, 4 for 23. He had a pretty good yards per carry in the spring game. Jaden Ball getting 1 carry, 5 yards. So we did have some backs get that 5+ yards per carry, but unfortunately, some of that was later in the game. So how much that means, I don't know, but definitely would like to see some more of some of these backs we don't see too much, including true freshman Jaden Ball. and of course, true sophomore Treon Webb. And with that said, I definitely want to move on to defense. I will tackle a little bit more of the offense and, of course, the defense when I talk about Billy Napier. But before we do, let me give a shout out to my friends at gatorchatter.com. Right now is an exciting or frustrating or all of the above, depending on how you define exciting. Independence Day, exciting. People are dying out there. Well, not really that extreme here, but, exciting. Well, we don't know what's going to happen with our season. But anyways, gatorchatter.com, all sorts of discussion going on right now, just like there is all over the interwebs. Gator owned and operated message board. Lots of great discussion going on now, including there's a guy talking about the plans for upcoming projects, and that is projects plural, for the Swamp and for the Florida Gators and their playing location. So definitely check that out at gatorchatter.com. Also, lots of discussion on what coaches may or may not come if and when Billy Napier is let go. Of course, you see that everywhere, but come join the discussion at gatorchatter.com, your Florida Gator sports bar. And so I'm back. Let's talk about this defense. Well, not good. Not good at all. Pretty terrible. We average, and what's the best way I can put this? We average about 300 yards allowed in the first half for our 2 FBS games. There are teams that average a little over 300 yards a game given up, and here we're doing it in our 2 FBS games in the first half. And of course, when you do that, you end up with things like being 20-0 down at the half, and your coach getting booed while he's on the big screen doing an anti-drinking and driving commercial. And I'm not going to say I blame Gator Nation for that at all. I'm just going to say that, yeah, an interesting look for sure. So the very first key I had for this game, of course, was to stop the run. Now, some of that was because I thought Connor Wegman would be starting for Texas A&M. And from what I've gathered, Marcel Reed found out, there were rumors day before that Wegman wouldn't be playing, but Marcel Reed found out he was starting in warmups. And so with a little notice, redshirt freshman comes in and just rocks the joint. They don't withhold the playbook or try and play conservative with him, and leads them on a big touchdown drive to start the game. And as they lead them on a big touchdown drive to start the game, that includes some big third down conversions, which is an issue that we've seen for years from the Gators defense. But anyway, said stop the run was the key. We totally failed at this one. Totally, absolutely failed. 310 yards given up to the Aggies. And some of that was Marcel Reed, just getting out of the pocket and running. Of course, there's a highlight going around X right now of Marcel Reed sending DJ Douglas to the ground with a great fake. And one of the interesting comments I saw, I know some other people really loved it, was it made Douglas chase after him like a werewolf or run as a werewolf, because he was kind of on all fours at that point trying to catch up. I also said, hey, let's have a pass rush. Pretty much failed at that. 0 sacks. And of course, that was, again, thinking we had Wegman. You stop the run, you force him not as mobile as a Marcel Reed. But again, you can still get a pass rush on a Reed. And again, didn't do that. Didn't get any sacks. Hit some big time passes, big time plays for, touchdowns. Had a touchdown pass called back due to a penalty, which of course we end up giving a touchdown on that drive anyways, but is what it is. And I said we had need multiple turnovers. We got 0 turnovers in the game, if I remember right. And I will double check that right now. And yeah. So, not good. Not a good day. Lost the turnover battle. 3 for the Aggies, 0 for the Gators. And it is interesting. I do want to say this. Jason Marshall, the cornerback, who I actually saw someone, and it may have been a friend of mine, talking about Jason Marshall, kind of giving a rough time about this game. Dude's PFS rating was around 80. He played 79 snaps, which was the most on the team. And when you have a minimum of 20 snaps, he was 8 points rated higher than the rest of the team, or the next guy on the team with 20 snaps. 8 points higher. Allowed 1 catch on 2 targets. So 80 for PFFs is a really good rating. So I do want to give him kind of a bit of a shout out for being a highlight and a low light of a day. One thing that most people, I don't know who all knew, who all didn't, but it's something I'd heard before the season, but it was not my news to break, so I didn't. Heard it through what I could consider confidence, and that's Ron Roberts has been calling plays this year, not Austin Armstrong. And that could be a difference. I've said, listen, our defense looks like it's regressed, and maybe it's regressed just like our offense, as teams have, started to pick up on tendencies. Some of it may be, hey, this guy's just, he's the guy that got fired at Baylor. He's the guy that lasted a year at Auburn, where I was hopeful he'd be the guy his first year at Baylor. But he's not. And I'm not saying AA or, Coach Am, I'm not saying he's much better, but I am saying that Ron Roberts is the one calling the plays and has given up in the first 2 FBS games, an average of around 300 yards, had about 300, a little bit over maybe for Texas A&M in the first half, and Miami 283 yards. Defense is not good. There's not really too many highlights. I mean, you've got guys like Jason Marshall, again, had a pretty good game. Hopefully we see more of that. Shamar James, another guy, had a pretty good game. Outside of that, really lots of questions. And I don't know if I can say how much of his scheme, how much of his players, because it's just been so bad for so long. And I know that's frustrating for Gator fans to hear. Definitely D-line needs work. I myself expected more from the D-line since we've had so much experience there. You had the true freshmen that came back from last year, but then it's interesting that guys like Kelby Collins are still not getting that much in reps. I think he had less than 15 reps this game after having a solid true freshman year. So I don't know what's going on with him and or others, but it's just not making sense to me. And then also we talked about in the pregame, you have Coach Chaos coaching A&M's defensive line after we said, yeah, he was, or I say we, after it was said about the Gators, yeah, he was one of the people impacting the defensive line. Well, defensive line arguably looks worse this year under Chapman than it did under Coach Chaos, and A&M's defensive line looked pretty good against us. Of course, Patrick Bateman, former linebacker coach at UF, the DC, along with head coach Mike Elko, who probably has a big hand on the A&M defense. And their defense looked pretty good. Again, shut us out in the first half. There was some real worry that we're going to get shut out for the game. Of course, ended up getting 3 scores, made it look closer than the game actually was, as A&M decided to just keep running the ball because we couldn't stop it. I mean, 310 yards, we couldn't do anything. So why do anything different if you're A&M? I joked with the A&M fan sitting in front of me. I said, you can do the water boy, the bourbon bowl, just take a knee every play and there's a chance that we're not coming back. And this was later on in the game, and after they had pretty much stopped throwing the ball, except for on rare occasions. But anyways, yeah, defense is awful. And I did say before I get into Napier, and this may be something to transition, I did say on X today on the podcast account that I'd have a lot more respect for Napier if he came into the presser today and announced that he actually was giving full control of the offense away to someone else. And if he announced, I'm taking play calling on defense away from Roberts because it's clearly not working. And you think that would at least be something while you're saying to be like a good gesture. I'm not saying it would work. I'm not saying it'd be great. But again, while you're here, show us a gesture that means you want to be here or that you're trying to fix things instead of the usual. And of course, it's just the usual coach talk. And then let's go ahead and let's step into my feelings on the Billy Napier situation. I found a tweet recently this week, last week, within the last 7 days at least, from November of 2021, where I was talking about how, and this was clearly before the last game of the season, because I had Louisiana's passing offense at 86th in the nation. 86th in the nation. This is the year Napier won the Sun Belt, the year we hired him. And I said, you can't be that one-sided in the SEC. And there are other tweets I have from the same time that say, this is what worries me, is this passing game. This worries me. This worries me. And I said in this tweet from November 2021, next year, if we don't hire a good OC, we're going 6-6. And of course, I started the podcast and felt a lot more positive about some things after the spring game and whatnot, which, I mean, spring games are a grain of salt, but I was really hoping. And of course, then we saw Utah and we felt much better. But at the end of the day, we finished 6-6. And then, of course, didn't make anything offensive changes. And arguably, that may or may not have been the right move. Of course, then we come out, lay an egg against Utah, at least before garbage time, lay an egg in several games. But hey, we sure took advantage of those bad defenses like South Carolina, who was the absolute lowest ranked pass D the week after we played them in the NCAA. And you had the 100th plus ranked defense of LSU that we did a lot on. And Mizzou didn't do well in that first half. Every time the defense got a stop, and they got several, we couldn't answer. They got a few stops, especially if you count, Georgia for field goals, got a few stops against Georgia. Offense couldn't answer. And so it's frustrating things like that. And I'm going to touch on offense more than anything else. Why? Because that's Billy Napier's big baby, the baby he refused to give up, the baby it looks like he decided to make no changes to, that he paid lip service, that they're, promoting Russ Callaway. And if they were, I don't see the fingerprints that you would see with, quick drops, quick routes that are downfield, 0, 1, 2, 3 step drops that you see in air raid passing styles. Again, not thinking we go to air raid, but at least we'd see stuff that would help this offense out, help make it more optimal. And we did not see that. So when I bring up this offense and I bring up this stuff, that was my worry back in November 2021. I do so because there was a sign there. There were also signs that we're going to have problems with Napier when we brought in two offensive line coaches, had 2 all SEC offensive linemen, and gave up 38% pressure on dropbacks. 38% of the time AR dropped back in 2022. He had pressure on him. That's bad, especially with an All-American and an All-SEC guy. And I'm talking about two different players, and those were Ethan White and, of course, Osiris Torrance. And you had freshman All-American Austin Barber. And we still had, again, 38% pressure on dropbacks. That's really high. It did drop some the next year, but part of that was a lot more pop passes and safe passes, like screen passes, that didn't give time for pressure, but also didn't put any pressure on the defense. But then, of course, at the end of last year, you think maybe we're going to see a change at the offensive line position, because we've got two offensive line coaches. They're not recruiting, too well at all. Lots of projects and not really anything, like not really too many high guys that can, come in, make an impact sooner. And we re-signed both of them. Granted, Darnell Stapleton ends up going to the NFL, but at the same time, Billy Napier made the decision to re-sign these offensive coaches. In his time at Florida, he has not gotten rid of a single coach that was with him at Louisiana. He's gotten rid of Corey Raymond, who had an impact because LSU's defense has looked better this year than, again, that 100th ranked abysmal defense we saw. Got rid of, Coach Chaos. Well, Coach Chaos, again, looked pretty good at A&M. But as far as public firings, again, I'm not going to, maybe Patrick Toney was pushed out the door, but I don't know why Kerry Colbert, after pulling in, Ethan Wilson and Andy Jean and Aiden Mizell, left at the same time. I don't know why he would be pushed out the door. Maybe it was just, hey, this is the time NFL started hiring coaches the week after the Super Bowl, and they're trying to find a way out. Our strength and conditioning coach, not getting the job done. He's going to keep him in position, as talked about how he made the change because the players wanted to change the strength and conditioning, which is good. He listened to his players, but instead of that, telling the coach to hit the road, he's like, here's an unnamed position in the building. We're not going to get rid of you. So again, that's a problem. And yeah, and the offense, of course, has been bad. And the D has been abysmal. And going through 3 play callers on D, and the D seem to get worse and worse and worse. And that's not good. And what's really not good, and I talked about a message that was from someone I didn't expect, that I was going to talk about. And I'm sitting in the swamp on Saturday, and I think it was before halftime, and my brother's usually at games with me, text me. And we've been taking, since last year, to most Gator games, we've been taking my nephew. And my nephew is 6, started going to games last year, went to LSU with us, as well as most of the home games. Looks at my brother and says to him, and I get this text, how come the Gators never win? And I can say when I was that age, I was watching the Gators start to become what they should be, getting to the first SEC title game to lose on a pick 6, and then win 4 straight SEC titles. And my nephew's seeing us not have a winning season ever in his memory, and that's not a good thing. And that really did not make me feel good, but I got permission to use that. I was going to put it on Twitter, but I figured probably better for here. And you got to have results, and you got to be able to change. Like I said, presser, even today, you've been blown out at home twice. It's ridiculous. You've lost by multiple scores in tons of FBS games. You're against teams that finished with a winning record. We're talking, this is now probably 3-15. Because I believe A&M finishes with a winning record, and Miami does. and yeah, it's a results business, and I say to people, you got to think about the players. Of course, I wrote on Gator Chatter this weekend about how I feel bad for the players that are in this situation, and I stand by that. But you got to think about also, as I told my buddy Ryan, who's with Alvarez Lawn Company, we're walking out of the stadium. I said, you got to think about it. Players from winning teams generally have a better shot. Not always, and there are players from losing teams that do this, but generally get more eyeballs for the NFL. Probably more players. I'm sure if you looked at it, more players per year to the combine are from winning teams because they're like, okay, these guys must be doing something right. Now, that's not always the case, of course, but by this team being this bad, and I don't think it's a lack of talent. I don't think this is a team that has the talent-wise should be blown out. In fact, I've even said about Steve Spurrier when he came out and said, yeah, Florida should win 8-10 this year. I told people, I don't think he was saying, yeah, I have lots of faith in this team. I think he was recognizing, here's what I could do with this talent against the schedule. This is what we need to do. And of course, it looks there's not a chance in heck that we do it. Again, I said for almost a year now, if not a year, a good coach goes 6-1 in this first stretch where you have 5 home games. You got a bad Mississippi State team on the road, who now it looks like we could possibly lose to. And you have Tennessee on the road. That's very manageable. Before you have a just rough stretch of 4 games. I'm going to say 4 because 0-3 FSU should not be considered part of that rough stretch anymore. Although I still think they're not anything we shouldn't be worried about. But I do think that putting them in the same league as a rough stretch as a Ole Miss, Georgia, Texas, LSU, I don't think that's quite where we're there. Of course, in his press conference today, as I'm recording this, Billy Napier says he sees a path to a 4th year. Granted, what else do you want Billy Napier to say? Of course, he's going to say he sees a path, but he's not going to tell you what that is because, I mean, frankly, that path is very narrow. As someone said, that would be winning out the schedule at this point. And I hate to really dog on him, and people that know me know I have dogged the last few coaches really bad. So I'm actually trying to be better for myself by not just going full rip mode. I know some people have, but as you'll probably see or have seen on the thumbnail here, I really am just done with this experiment. There are things I questioned. I wanted to be positive about it. Question from the beginning. I talked about the tweets from 2021, but there was always hope that something could happen. Like I said, I think if Russ Callaway, we see more of his fingerprints, I thought our offense could have been better this year. I had hoped that maybe we'd see more of the Ron Roberts that his first year at Baylor, help get them to a New Year's Six Bowl. Instead, we've got the Ron Roberts of year 2 Baylor, the Ron Roberts that got fired by Auburn after 1 season, or at least was only at Auburn for 1 season. So, I mean, I don't know. And I do want to say I've seen lots of question online about Billy Napier and is he really a good guy? Because I see people saying a good guy. There's an unreleased episode. It is uploaded to YouTube. I never released it. And it's talking about the good things about Billy Napier. I didn't release it because I didn't want a situation like this to happen. And now there's a bunch of comments just crapping on the guy, which as a football coach, do it. Fine. He honestly is statistically the worst Florida coach possibly of all time. I saw there's an article talking about how he's the first coach to do this or that since Van Fleet, and I think it was put by Dave Waters. And I said I'm offended that Billy Napier would ever be in the same sentence as General Van Fleet. And if you're not familiar, just look up Van Fleet, our former coach, who ended up being a general and being a big part of World War II. Gator legend. But yeah, I will say, getting back to it, Napier is a quality guy. I got a chance to meet him over the summer. Took time. It was at a random Florida Victorious event that popped up the night before. Took as much time as people wanted to speak to him, at least while I was there. Not really trying to hurry people along. Sometimes you see autograph signings or whatnot, people just scribble their autograph and move on. But no, he took time to listen and talk with everyone that was there, again, while I was there, and I could see it. My wife and I do know a current recruit for the class of 2026 who just raves about Napier. Grew up an FSU fan, but really love Napier. I love that Napier has the Gator Made program that helps prepare Florida players for life beyond football, which unfortunately, I hate to make this joke, but with the way the teams they're on are coached is something very important for them, and that's at life beyond football. And he also was part of, getting players to do 48 8-hour days of community service throughout their 4 years in Gainesville. That averages to 1 8-hour day a month. And we're talking, Habitat for Humanity, or going to the local Y, or Boys and Girls Club, or Bread of the Mighty, or any of these great Gainesville organizations that helps people in need. I do think that's something really cool. So I will say, and I know there are people out there that hate this, he is a good guy, but terrible football coach, and definitely not someone who I want. I definitely was full candor, hoping to see at least an announcement before I recorded this. Of course, that didn't happen. He's coaching in Starkville this weekend, and I'll see him there. And I'll be there cheering on the team. And again, we got some stuff coming up, but there's not much I can say that hasn't been said. I'm just trying to say it nicer than the way many people have. But yeah, I'm done with this experiment. And there remain people that, tried to tell us for years that there's no problem with the offense. But again, I go back to, we're now singing to a point where we're 18.5 points per game against FBS opponents. And that's not good. And I know it'll probably should go up with this bad Mississippi State team under first-year coach Jeff Levy. But then again, they might put up points, and we'll talk about this later in the week, on a Ron Roberts D that has given up 300 yards in the first half in both FBS games. But the point is, done with Napier. He's a good guy, but don't want him around my Gators club, or my Gators football team, I guess you could say, as there are Gator clubs around Florida. And I was just thinking of like how people call it soccer clubs. That's really where my mind is right now, just everywhere, like, woo. But anyways, with that said, I will say this. It's been an interesting experiment, but hopefully it opens the way for something better. Of course, a lot of people talking about Lane Kiffin, who a lot of people wanted in 2021. And of course, lots of people saying no to that. And we'll see if that happens. We'll see if it ends up being that, or if we somehow go with an up-and-comer again. And of course, if we did that, we're probably looking at USF Alex Golish, but I have no insight on that. Just taking guesses, and that's not to say here's who I want, don't want. But if you're still on this episode and you want Kiffin, comment that below. If you want someone else, comment it below. Let's have a discussion. Let's have some fun. And also remember to like, remember to share, remember to subscribe if you have not, and definitely also comment letting me know if you want slides back, if it's easier for you on YouTube to see a slide that, gives like these 18.5 points per game or other stats, and then the keys to the game that I had up and how we didn't do. Any feedback you have is welcome. And, it's been a rough few years for Gator Nation, but it looks like hopefully we're pulling the nose up and happy days will come back soon. But we'll see. But until then, all kinds of weather, we all stick together. And that's supporting our team. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be out there being the cheeriest about the coach. Support the players. And with that said, thank you all for listening. And as always, go Gators.